My name is Vera Aronow. I'm on the board of Rivertown Film, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our second annual Rockland in Motion series of short films with roots in Rockland. I want to welcome everyone who's here, our members, our filmmakers, our moderator, our audience, and thank all our sponsors, in particular to mention the New York State Council of the Arts, who's an important supporter. I'll just mention the people who are here. Our filmmakers are Josh Helaughstra, who's here with A Time of Two Joys. Marta Renzi and Dan Wolff are here with their film, The Elders Have Fallen. John Gray will arrive a bit late. His film is Welcome to Forever. The Josh Atesh Litle, who directed Deceipt, unfortunately can't make it, but if he should show up, he's welcome. Frank Vitale, who directed Moon Nymph, also said he couldn't make it, but should something change and he comes, we'll get to talk to him. Conor Macfinn is here with Ariel, which is a proof of concept short that's about a longer film that's in the works. Katherine Matheson is here with See Me, and Marta Renzi is also here with Wait a Minute. Wisteria is represented by Judith Rose, who is a performer and choreographer who appears in the film as well as in See Me, which is here tonight. And she is representing because Lucas Ruderman couldn't join us due to work. And Kal Toth is here with Duane Eubanks, and Elliott Forrest is here with Rockland Pride. Our wonderful moderator is Charlotte Buck, Olympic swimmer, Olympic rower who represented the United States in Japan this summer. And we were thinking outside the box a little bit, having her moderate. She's going to ask a couple of questions of each filmmaker, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience and other filmmakers. So please stay on mute unless you're speaking. Thank you, everyone. And Charlotte.
Thank you so much for having me, Vera, and Juliana for inviting me. Rockland has always been my home, so it's always fun to watch arts and culture that has been generated here in my home community. Like Vera said, I grew up here in Nyack, and I went and represented Team USA at the Olympics this year for rowing. It's okay, everybody mistakes me for being a swimmer. Anyways, when I was growing up, I was part of the art scene here. I grew up in theater. I did Shakespeare plays all through my childhood. And a lot of these filmmakers are friendly faces to me that I've grown up with. So it's been amazing to get to see what they've generated over the past few years. I just have a few questions for everybody and a few specific ones as we go along. So I think I'm just going to kick it off with Marta. I'm just going to go in order of the films as they were on Rockland in Motion. Marta, it was beautiful getting to watch your music video for Wait a Minute. I think you really did such an amazing job of capturing that moment last summer where we did have all this hope and joy, and we got to experience that through your music video. And I just wanted to know what the experience was like being out in New York and getting to see Selena interact with these passerbys who didn't know that they were going to end up in one of your films.
A complete pleasure. You know, it was a complete pleasure. We did it quickly and had to speed up more as the sun went down. Some of the people who look like they're strangers to us weren't, but a good maybe half and half strangers, half pretending to be strangers. But it was all improvised. Even the strangers only met us, I mean, even the shills only met us right there. So it was, it could only happen on a beautiful day in New York when people were feeling recently freed. You may notice that, or I don't know if you see, there's a guy in a sort of walker. He's sitting on his walker near the woman with the dogs, and his mask was up. when we started shooting, but I noticed he had enough vanity, bless him, to pull it down, which made me glad because I didn't want this to be a masked event at all. So that's enough about that, right?
Well, it was a beautiful experience to see the just breadth of the community that you interacted with. I think particularly there's also a woman in a wheelchair who seemed like she got a lot of joy interacting with such a young, expressive woman as Selena. You also worked with Dan for The Elders Has Fallen, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about how that collaboration came around.
That was the Nyack Library was looking for poems. I'm trying to remember resistance, resilience. We've been married. Resilience. And I had this poem and they wanted a video. So Marta and I got together and, you know, made a video that we thought went with the poem.
It's interesting because it's hardly any moving footage until the very end, which is not something I've done before. And in fact, if I'm not talking too much, for 365 days during the pandemic, I was taking moving footage of nature. But when it came time to do this, I thought, nah, that's too much activity for such a still event. So I just did screenshots of the moving footage I'd done.
It's hard when you got words to figure out how the images work, but don't overwhelm them or vice versa, right? So that's why we've been married this long.
I mean, I did think it was beautiful that it really allowed the words to shine through and sort of complemented it well, but really the focus could be on the poem. And particularly there was this line at the end about the rebirth, that you got that sense of resilience and hope that we have for the future.
It's very smart for a swimmer.
Even for a rower.
Even for a rower. You know, I did have to go to college to start doing this.
Right.
I learned something.
There you go.
We've made a bunch of stuff together, me and Daniel, actually. I don't know, we must have, I mean, we first collaborated years ago, before children, before I was really a filmmaker. But lately, since the pandemic especially, we must have done 5 or 6, each a little bit different to Daniel's poetry.
Thanks.
Okay, going on to Katherine Matheson and See Me. This was also a beautiful expression of what we've gone through the past year. You said in your preamble to it that it changed a bit because you filmed it in 2019 and then you were editing it during the pandemic. Was there something different you had in the vision for it before the events of the past 2 years that then new inspiration was layered on top?
So when we started, it was early 19. So we just like went, oh, let's film this dance that Igor and Judith had put together to a piece of music, a gorgeous piece of music that we couldn't get the rights to, no matter what. I mean, the guy just hated me, basically. He was like, just finally like, go away, leave me be. And so we had to figure out the sound. And so a friend of mine's a composer, and she made the music. And then, I cut the picture kind of by itself, and then she added the music. But yeah, it's very, that's the unconscious, right? That really knows what's going to happen before it happens, because we came up with this concept, and I even put fireworks in before everyone started lighting fireworks. It's very interesting how it just kind of suddenly captured the moment, even though it was, like a year and a half later.
I think the layering of, you sort of had the cop car sounds over the music too, that was very evocative of the past year that we've had.
Mm-hmm. A lot of sirens in there. Like, listen, there's nothing like stock footage, guys. I don't know if anyone else is into stock footage, but I'm seriously into stock footage.
It is really interesting for me to hear that you had a different vision for the music, because I thought that piece worked so beautifully with the movement. And I grew up as a cellist, so I did particularly like it. Like, it is very reminiscent of Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber, something by Shostakovich, that it has these like very long, just deep strings from the cello. You're like, I can really resonate with me.
You know, I just have to say something really quick. Judith, so when Judith injured her hand very badly right after that performance, and it was a long recovery. And it was so interesting that right after filming it, and her hands were so evocative and so important. And that was the composer, when she said it, she goes, I just need to do one thing, is make music based on the hands, on her hands. And she didn't even know what had happened to her hand. She really hurt it. It was a long recovery. And so, yeah, it's funny.
Well, Judith, I'm glad that you're here, both representing this film and also Wisteria. I just wanted to know a little bit about what the process was like working with Katherine. You're on mute.
I found it to be fascinating because working with Katherine is not a linear, it's not a linear process. And yet you're with someone who has a vision, and being in the space of that process with her and with the friends that she brought along. And her vision was to create a film in the manner of the 1920s, lurid horror movies, reminiscent of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, you know, what everyone sees in film school, that kind of lurid pre-war, between the wars kind of a look. And if you notice and you look closely, Igor and I even wore that black makeup on our eyes to get that whole look of that time period. And what was amazing was that this whole film was filmed with flashlights. Katherine was insistent on doing the process exactly as it was at that time, without electricity. So she was on this tall ladder, and she had a bunch of friends coming to volunteer, and everyone was holding flashlights. And that is what created that incredible feeling of the 1920s cinema. And for me, that was magic. That was magic. So to say what kind of process it was an event in my life, just to be in the process of filming with Katherine.
I mean, it truly takes a village to have all your friends come and help you out with that. So you also worked with Lucas, and I mentioned before when it was just the filmmakers here, I was really hoping Lucas would be here. He was somebody that I went to high school, we graduated together, and it's been amazing to see his films over time and his progression. Wisteria was such a beautiful project, and I just want to hear a little bit about the difference with that in comparison to working with Katherine for See Me.
So Katherine has her friends with her, and Lucas has his friends that he went to film school with. So what was nourishing for me, and I said this at the end of the day, because Katherine's crew were peers of her own age, but Lucas's crew were peers of his own age, which are several generations away from my age, and a few generations even away from Igor's age, who's a generation or two away from me. So what was luscious in working with Lucas and his friends was you had this intergenerational collaboration. And that to me was magical. And at the end of this long day, we sat in a circle, and I needed to acknowledge that I have hope for the future, for the next generation coming, after having worked with these stellar young people. And Charlotte, you know all of them, so you know what I'm talking about. They're creative, they're mensches, and it was just and we were exhausted. We were working, Igor and I left at 6 a.m. We didn't get home till 11 p.m., but we had the most incredible day. And part of it was first working, See Me, working with Katherine and her peer group, and then working in Wisteria with a completely different generation, no less stellar and no less amazing. And to me, that collaborative, the idea of collaborating with people who are all on the same page, with a passion to create something beautiful and true, that was a gift.
That's a beautiful sentiment. Actually, I'm gonna then jump to Kal, because that was a lot of what I got out of the Duane Eubanks film, was this process and the story that he's gone through of seeing his inspirations in music and then serving as an inspiration to the next generation, which actually all the filmmakers can jump in if they would like to. Like, that is such an important thing to me as an athlete now, that I have progressed to a place where I can help out the next generation, but I still have this older generation of athletes that I really aspire to be like and to work towards. So Kal, I just want to ask you a little bit about, is that part of your own inspiration when you're working, that you want to see yourself giving back to the next generation as the generation before gave to you as a filmmaker?
I don't know if I'm that selfless, but yeah, I mean, to be honest, you know, what's fun about doing documentaries is that you really don't know what that journey is. So that story and everything that you pull from it is accurate, but it wasn't necessarily what I saw going in. You know, it's really, the idea was just to follow Duane and one of his days at Brooklyn School of Music, and just sort of experience it. And so basically then you come back with, we had like 2 days of footage, and you just look at the footage and you try to find, I don't try to lead the story, I let the story that's there lead me. And that's what came out of it, was this, for me, was this sense of continuum, which to me is like a fantastic word. I think John Mayer used it on one of his early albums. And, you know, I never had a sense of continuum before until I saw Duane's story and how it came to life and within the film. So in a sense, I feel just as much as an audience member and sort of experiencing that sort of, you know, story of, yeah, as you just said, generations. So, and I think it's interesting that you're saying you feel it as an athlete as well too, and sort of like an importance to pass it down.
What inspired you to work with him? I know that Duane is also someone from our own community, that he is from Nyack. Was that just your initial, you'd seen him at the Hopper House and you found him a figure that you would be interested in producing something about?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. And that's similar to what Judith was saying earlier, how often we're all connected. And you said Lucas was your classmate. So I went to school with Duane's wife, Alita. And although we didn't necessarily stay in touch over the years, at some point we became acquainted again. And then, you know, one thing led to another, and then this film was made. So yeah, it's interesting how the little dynamics and relationships end up, you know, guiding or navigating the art in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about creating something, is you can draw in the people around you, you find inspiration in just the people that you happen to meet, and you're just lucked into ending up knowing Duane.
And Nyack is very much like that too. Yeah, right. So
it really is. Which, going on to another person that I know personally, Conor Macfinn. It was beautiful watching your the story of Ariel and what you're going to expand into a larger animated film. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about where you see the whole vision of the film going, that we see this little glimpse of this boy struggling, a very universal story, him struggling to be supportive in a time of tragedy just with his mother. And I just wondered if you could expand on where the story is going to head.
Well, basically, it's based off a Middle Eastern Jewish, it's called Sephardi Mizrahi folk tale. And the boy, basically, you can look it up. There are many different versions on it. You can find it on Google right now, so, if you want. But essentially, the boy, the lion doesn't eat the boy. The boy goes to Cairo and he returns home rich, is essentially how it ends up. And it's going to be a full 22-minute film. And hopefully we will get it picked up and turned into a TV series, because he's in the Ottoman Empire and his father was a trader, and there's lots of opportunities for him to travel around to different places.
Is there something from this story that you are particularly drawn to and were inspired to expand on?
Well, I grew up with this folk tale as a little boy, and I'm Sephardi, and there wasn't a whole lot of content about Sephardi Jews out there right now. And rather than sitting around and complaining, I wanted to do something about it, especially since, you know, like I said, in my culture, this is a fairly common story to have. So that's why I was drawn to it, and I really pushed for this story out of the various other projects that we could have done for our next film.
Amazing. You did also have an explanation that you liked doing a period piece as animation because then people don't get so caught up on the details.
Right. So that actually I took from an animator, Dan Haskett, who I saw lecture at TAFE, Toronto Animation Art Festival International, a few years ago. And he was specifically talking about a film called Grave of the Fireflies, which was a Japanese film about two war orphans in World War II. And it's not a typical animated film. If you haven't seen it, you should. And there's people ask, why does the animation work for this movie? And he said, because you don't intellectualize. And that occurred to me that is something that you can do with animation that you can't do with live action. The other thing that you can do with animation that you can't do with live action is that if there are any elements of magic in it, like if you have a semi-anthropomorphized lion in a live action movie, it's going to be CG, and everybody's going to start thinking about, oh, look at the special effects, isn't that dazzling? You don't just sort of take it for what it is.
I think that's very interesting. Like, as a viewer, that you do get swept away by all the details, and obviously the production costs are a lot higher trying to do something that's like so technically exact, and it gets away from just the drama of the story and what you're trying to communicate as a filmmaker. Let's see, Josh Helaughstra for A Time of Two Joys. It was a lot of fun watching your short film, and I was just wondering, what were the technical challenges you had of doing this film? You have this one character, or this one actor playing a lot of the characters, and obviously that like tied into the themes of the story as well.
Yes, there was a lot of unfolding of what caused that. I mean, we were working together to try and find something that would convey the original story best. And as it was unfolding, it became that Ray would play all of these different characters, and that would help layer in and show the sort of elements of reality and place people in the world where they want to, as opposed to the chronology of the film, which sort of takes you in and out of that. It can deliberately sort of confuse that in a sense. And I think the biggest challenge is, I mean, the logistics of getting one person in all that makeup and getting them in the right spot, and the time it takes for them to switch and to be somebody different, and to really get immersed in something, and the characters, especially the two speaking characters and speaking roles in the film, we wanted them so different from each other. And I really felt that it was necessary to give him that space to try to produce that. And it was also the challenges is of simply thinking we could put it in such a short time, and realizing when you have one person playing 4 different people, it's going to take 4 times as long as you think.
Was there something about the past year that sort of inspired this film as well? Sort of intersubjective being something that like we probably all thought about a little more as we're trapped with our own selves this year and not exposed to so many things in public?
Certainly, and a lot of the work was done pre-pandemic. And as someone who's already sort of been, I like to think as an introvert who really tries, there's a lot of moments where I find myself in that rib shack just as he did, and trying to find a way to sort of relate that kind of inner workings, where there's a lot of silence and you're sort of separated from that. And it's so often we find ourselves being different people, and we end up being so closed off, and definitely the last year, we've become more of our closed off inner selves rather than these people we create to be in these situations. And so I definitely think that helped inform in those final stages of piecing it all together what we really wanted to say, I think.
That's part of why I think that your choice to have the one person play Raymond play the two characters really resonated with me, of like, you are sometimes putting on a facade of who you think you're supposed to be in those public settings, and it's interesting having an actor putting on his character to play both of these people in the classroom.
And to see how, I mean, a lot of those people can represent very much the same side of the same person and yet be so drastically different. And you know, sometimes you get accused of being a chameleon. In one social situation, you're something different, and in another one, you're slightly different. But you're working to try to piece who you really are with all of those sort of murmurings on top and elements we call our personas, but really are just sort of facades or little moments, little tweaks of not reality. And I definitely think that he was a big help in kind of helping try to find those different angles to create the same person in one. But that it was so for, I think.
I really enjoyed the experience. Thank you so much. And I think our last filmmaker who's here tonight, Elliott Forrest, with his short on Rockland Pride. For me, it was a really special experience getting to see your creation because you are somebody that I have grown up in the community, and I have these really strong memories of you being such an amazing storyteller, particularly at the Nyack Center for holiday events. And I just want to know, did you find it difficult to translate that to a very different medium that you're so used to the spoken word?
No. I have been shooting and doing storytelling through visual medium for a long time, on and off. As I said in the introduction to the short film, I particularly, the COVID experience was film camp for me, and I was able to really explore a lot more of shooting and editing because I was home a lot, and ended up editing a lot, I think 6 different virtual galas. And so the expressive nature of telling story through images and storytelling is something that I'm doing. I'm working on another documentary right now. I directed a PBS television special a couple of years ago. This particular one was just, as I said, it was an experiment to go out and shoot something and edit it in a day. And I called it a postcard film, because I just wanted to have 4 minutes of experiencing what Rockland Pride is like on the street. And I just tried to capture that with Alex Francisco's great performance on the street with David Budway. So I just tried to capture a little 4-minute snapshot of what it's like to be on the street in Nyack.
I mean, it really did feel like you could be immersed and you get the experience of being at a public event in Nyack, like so centered around street fairs, but doing things outside as a community. I think that was very effectively communicated to the audience. Was there some particular reason that you wanted to add this challenge to your own filmmaking, that you were accomplishing it all in one day?
Part of it is that I had bought this equipment specifically to make a documentary about the Rock and Rollers, which is a local rock band in Rockland that all the members are on the spectrum. And I had it in my head basically throughout the entire COVID experience that I needed to condense Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours into as short amount of period of time as possible. So for the skills that I felt like I wanted to upgrade, I've been editing audio for 40 years, but I hadn't been shooting and editing that long. So I was just, every chance I got, I just wanted to explore the camera, edit as much as I could, and try to enjoy it. And I was just really, frankly, honored and delighted that you guys picked it to show in this festival.
It was a beautiful piece of work. Okay, we have John.
Can I just say something quickly, which is, it's also wonderful that you had access to great music, because, you know, Katherine talked about getting music rights, and it's been a bane of my existence. How lucky to have that great music that, you know, you edited to beautifully.
Well, I have to say, I didn't really bother with rights and things like that. I went ahead and just made it. And I actually, again, it was sort of a personal class project, so I didn't really think it was going to be out there. So if Paul McCartney comes after me, I'll let you know.
Always a danger. You never know with those big songwriters. Okay, John Gray just hopped on the call. It's great to have you here. Your piece, Welcome to Forever, was amazing. I just wanted to know a little more about the challenges of directing over Zoom. Obviously, a lot of these people were able to film in our community here in the area, but directing people in Canada must have been quite a challenge over the past year.
Yeah, it's my second film I've done through Zoom. The first one, I actually recorded it through Zoom because it was supposed to be a Zoom meeting. So it didn't matter that it looked like, kind of like crap, like Zoom does. This one, I wanted to try to make it look a little bit better if I could. So we decided to try shooting on an iPhone, which you can now do in 4K, which is like unbelievable to me, but that's the world we're in now. And, I just looked for something I could do with just a couple of actors, and I wanted to try to use a married couple so we could have two actors together safely. And so I was able to coerce two friends of mine into playing these roles. And it was, it definitely works. I mean, I was in Nyack, they were in Vancouver. There's a lot of disadvantages to not being face-to-face with them. But, we managed to communicate and, work together fairly fluidly. I'm hoping it's my last one. I hope it's my last, non-in-person movie, but it was fun.
I liked your choice to have just a few fixed camera angles. That was, it really brought the story to life of like coming from being filmed by the house almost, and then obviously the Zoom conversation of the wife talking to her dead husband over the program. Did you feel like that was limiting, being like you're just gonna have the sort of the computer camera, the surveillance camera, and then one other angle?
Yeah, I mean, it was purposely limiting. I'm always fascinated with, whenever I see surveillance camera imagery, it always fascinates me for some reason. I'm not sure why, but there is this sense that everyone's watching us all the time. And so I think when you see that kind of fixed camera thing, and it's not even about composition, because you don't know where people are in the frame, things change and move around, the camera just stays there. To me, there's something very eerie about this all-seeing eye that's just kind of watching us. And so to try to do a movie where the camera doesn't move, it's just this fixed thing, and you're not always sure if it's the computer point of view or if it's surveillance from the house itself, but just trying to give this sense of eerie, sort of omnipresent watching.
I mean, it really puts you as the viewer as like, oh, I'm observing this action that's happening in front of me, which I think.
So, I also hope it's kind of dispassionate. It's just sort of this observational thing. It's not making any judgments. It's not, it's not cutting to a close-up or telling you how to feel. It's just this observational visual that you sort of have to add some of your own drama to.
That's amazing. I missed a question for Josh that was in the chat, so I think we'll just cycle back to that. Those are all my individual questions for you all. Josh, someone was just wondering, what was your thinking behind the emo farm boy character in The Time of Two Joys? Zuzu loves that character.
Oh, well, I think it's fairly simple. I was that emo farm boy. I mean, I definitely have lived that life. So he was just as every other character a part of me. I wrote him to be sort of a simple one in that sense.
That's all my questions for individuals. If you all have any questions for each other, open it up. I have a few questions for you generally, if we want to go to that first. Maybe the first one as a jumping off point was, this was a question I actually had for Frank Vitale. Just I felt like there was a lot of inspiration of coming from the Garnville Art Center as sort of another character almost in his films. And I just wanted to hear a little bit from you all about how Rockland County as sort of like a character has come into some of your films.
Yes.
You stumped us.
I always found I had a studio in the, whatever that is, 99 Main or something in there. I was with Chris Burns, and we used to just go out with a camera all the time. We shot a film about the first year that Obama ran for president, and the whole town is just full of wonderful open characters. And Mike Rogozic, you guys, I don't know if you guys knew Mike Rogozic. He was like, I thought he was our Andy Warhol superstar. So I mean, just there's a real street life in Nyack, and you could really just talk to people about whatever. And they would meet you there.
And to your question, Charlotte, I mean, clearly, I mean, that was sort of exactly what I was trying to capture, which was, you know, just this little moment of Nyack, yeah, and Rockland County, and not just the people, but that feeling, you know. There's a sense, particularly with Rockland Pride, that I think they've done such a great job in supporting so many people, that people feel free, they feel open, they feel safe. And I think that comes across in a number of the films that are represented here.
I guess I'm curious to direct that question to Marta, because her films are they're Hudson Valley films, and maybe that's only because she lives here, but I think that it becomes a real character in your films, Marta. I can't imagine. I mean, your current film, yeah, was shot in Manhattan, but it, for that reason, feels different to me than most of what you do, which really interacts with the landscape in a similar way that your film with Dan interacts with the landscape, which, by the way, I saw twice and did not realize that there was no movement, that these were still films. I maybe I'm not very observant, but I thought that the words and the choices of stills were pretty darn good for me not to have noticed that. But anyway, you do have a sense of place in these films. So do you have what would you say to that?
Yes, yes. Yeah, you know, I love making work outdoors. So sometimes it's a city outdoors, sometimes it's a landscape outdoors. I like it because it's cheap, because you have natural light, and because it's surprises can happen because it's outdoors, whether they're human or natural. And I rely on surprise. I build it into what I make. So I guess that interaction, whether it's local Rockland County or, you know, there's a boat that goes by the Hudson River, and actually Daniel was there, encouraged me not to miss it. But that aspect, you know, yes, we all love Nyack, but every place has people who inhabit it, who feel they own it. Then there's the city buildings, which are like, you know, the hook in her magnum opus. And, you know, and then there's this surprise of a boat going by, which is like the people walking by in Elliott's Pride Day. You know, there are these features that occur that are not scripted. And I guess for yours too, particularly in the work we've seen tonight, Elliott, we have that in common, you know, that you take what's there. Yeah, I organized a lot of dancing, but lots of it was taking advantage of what's already there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with you on two things, and
as a camera person.
Yeah, as a camera person, and sometimes an editor. And it was all chance. It was magic. It was so much fun. It was like some toys, some shadows. But I want everyone to remember to check out Bricktown, which really is such an ode to Garnerville, which we all love and almost lost. And that's another example of using this amazing set that's just sitting there. And Marta just like took it over and used so much of the architecture and especially the fire escapes and loading docks. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful place. And it's just a very, I miss it a lot. It's the acceptance of spontaneity and happenstance and surprise, like what you were saying before, those little surprises.
And then control in the editing room.
Yeah.
And that definitely came through for me on Frank's Moon Nymph, that like Garnerville itself you have this sort of rubble underground, this hidden underneath that only this one nymph character sees, and then you have the exposed arts and culture that she feels like she's just an observer as part of it. I thought that film also did a great job of just interacting with the other artists in the community, which was beautiful. Obviously, that's like something we've talked about for a few of you. But that's one of the challenges of COVID, is not being able to be as collaborative with each other. And I was wondering, what are something like, and do any of you have something that you overcame last year and you were able to have these collaborations? Obviously, Marta and Dan, you live together, it makes it a little easier. But for the rest of you, were you able to sort of create new avenues for yourself to make connections for filmmaking?
Yeah, actually, something that I was able to do was that I have quite an international group of people working on my movie. We've got people in Israel, we have people in the United States, we have people in Italy working on this. And actually, it was helpful that people were sort of ironically helpful that people were just sort of around and willing to do things on Zoom. And I kind of think that that's going to be the future of filmmaking, because or animated filmmaking at least, because the talent is very global, and rather than having to deal with visas and pay to fly all of these people to one central location, they can all just work from home, and you can find great people really anywhere in the world.
I think, for me, one of the big positive effects quarantining had in terms of film festivals is that I found myself able, as I am now, participating in these Q&As that I would normally not have been able to do, because I just wouldn't have been able to travel to Ohio or Kansas for a festival. But I was able to do it like this, and it was great to interact with other filmmakers, and that was a really positive thing that I would not have had otherwise.
Julie has another question for you, John, about just more about directing virtually. Were you live with your actors asking for multiple takes, or did you send guidance for what video to record beforehand?
Yes, we were live. It was a little bit tricky because, again, I wanted to shoot this on an iPhone that they controlled, so I couldn't really see it during the take. So they had a laptop, which is really like me, in their house, and I was watching the scene through Zoom from the laptop. So I wasn't seeing it actually the way the iPhone was recording it. So once we got the camera set where I wanted it, or roughly where I wanted it, and do a take, I would have to then have them show me the take on the Zoom screen, so I could just be sure it was what I wanted. The camera was right there, so it was, it was kind of tedious in that way. But we were doing it in real time, and I could ask for adjustments and give them direction, and they gave me great ideas and things. Well, let me try this, and so it worked really, really well in that respect.
Charlotte, can I just comment quickly too on what you asked about the changes during COVID itself, and it doesn't relate to my film, but many of you know that we have produced this series of concerts of protest music in Nyack. We did it for 3 years, and then this was going to be the 4th year, and then COVID happened, so we couldn't do it in person, so we did it virtually. And I just want to give a shout out to Lucas Ruderman, because he seems to be the connection to a lot of people here. He's extremely talented. I wish he was here. But we ended up hiring, I think, 6 or 7. We didn't pay a lot of money, but a little bit of money to 6 or 7 different filmmakers to do a virtual version of the Songs of Protest. So, and it's still on the Arts Rock website. It's free. Anyone can watch it. But they're lovely little films. Roger Grange did one, and Lucas did one, and they were all original songs. So beautiful new film music videos of original songs done by local filmmakers. And we certainly wouldn't have done that if we could do it on stage. So it was really kind of an amazing forced experience that turned out really well.
Yeah, I'll chip in. It is a great program, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely should check it out on the Arts Rock channel. But this Rockland in Motion is another example of that. We have shown programs of short films live in the past, and this opened up a whole other possibility. We can include a lot more people and a much wider range. It's turned out really, this is the second year that we've done it, and we'll continue doing it. And I'm sure there'll be a balance between, you know, live and online, but we'll certainly continue doing it online. It's allowed us to do things that we would never have been able to do. And thank you all for participating. It's been really nice.
Thanks for having us.
Right, I just want to
Thank
jump
you for
in.
having us.
One thing that's great about it too is the little videos that everyone did to introduce their film that are part of the program. That was also really nice. Thank you. And you can tell your friends, because the program will be available to keep watching through the 26th, so it's not too late to watch the films.
Vera, did you also have a question that you wanted to ask?
I do. I had another question for Marta and Dan, and I was just wondering, when you started making poetry films, were there particular films that you looked to as models, or did you just jump in like you do with any film and figure out what works? I was just curious about that.
Well,
or do you have poetry films you admire other than the great ones that you did yourself?
You know, this isn't particularly nice, but I was very interested in what doesn't work with poetry films, which tends to be somebody pontificating poetry at you. And in this one, for example, we talked about how there couldn't be any people in it. And it's partly because I think Brooklyn Demi was here recently. He may have left by now, but he was saying, now, are those trees that have fallen, those elders, or are those people? And I thought, well, you know, I want to film where there aren't any people in it, so you're going to have to try to figure that one out. So I think it was the examples of things I didn't want to do so much, and then we kind of wung it.
And each one is a little bit different, and there's no budget, and it's usually this reader, which I think is both a gift and a limitation.
I don't understand the limitation, but yes.
But no, you know, I because, you know, I'm a submitting fool with my work. I submitted a few of our poetry collaborations, and they don't do very well. I mean, I think I got Brinks that showed here last year was accepted in one, and in two, actually. But I think they're too homemade. I think real poetry, maybe you know better, Vera, but it looks to me like what poetry festivals I see, they're more sort of public television-y, high production values, elegant voiceover. They're not so direct and homemade. And, you know, and some of them are good. I made fun of them, but some of them are powerful, but they're not immediate.
Interesting. No, I don't know. That's why I was asking. And I found your films powerful. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's mostly the writing, but you know,
it's mostly the filmmaking.
It's like with music videos, you know, nowadays, I think musicians almost have to have a video of almost any kind. And this is maybe what poets are learning too late. Nobody's going to read these stupid things. So you better have some, you know, because poetry is not commonly read. So it's good to have a show that makes people sit still. Not you probably, Vera, but, you know, poetry shy people are less shy if there's something to absorb them.
I think it's a little bit the point about animation that you made earlier, which is that thing that you can do more with it than you thought. The same with poetry and video. I think you can kind of branch out in a way that gives you freedom.
I think there's also like an added level of emotion that you as writer are adding, that it's more interesting having your take on it than perhaps someone that is just sort of this nice lilting tone, but that there is this, you get the emotional resonance that you had with the pieces you were writing it as you speak it.
I think that's right.
We made a Spanish translation, and I think for the NYAC library, and I think actually we should try having some maybe
Spanish speaking person do it.
Yeah, it'd be fun to see how that feels.
That'd be cool.
Though only native speakers will really know how it feels.
Right, that sounds good.
All right, well, that's all the questions I have for you all. If you have any other-
How good an interlocutor was Charlotte Buck?
Yeah.
Great.
accidental skills I've picked up now that I actually get interviewed over this past year.
I'm sure that helped. I did have a couple more questions if you have patience. I was just wondering, John Gray, how did you get started? Were you in theater first? Were you an actor and a director? I mean, your films are so beautiful and the acting and directing is so polished. I just wondered what medium you started in.
Well, thank you. I was lucky enough. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I was very fortunate to have this goal in my head from a very, very early, like I was like 11 years old or maybe even younger. I thought I wanted to be an actor because I thought the actors did everything. And I get inspired when I would see a great performance in a movie, and I would try to replicate that. And I start to realize that there's a consciousness behind the camera that really is sort of the storyteller. I think, which is a great thing for the world. I did not become an actor because I sucked. And I just, I think part of what helped me was that I didn't realize how impossible what I was trying to do was. I had no connections. I just didn't know anybody. I just wanted to make movies. And so I just stumbled forward until I managed to write enough scripts and get an agent. And but it really began with just the idea of wanting to tell stories. And what I love most about seeing a movie when I was a kid was the sense of feeling not alone. If I saw something I recognized in a character that I knew about myself, and I would feel like, so maybe I'm not a misfit. Maybe I have something in common with this person and I feel less alone. And I just thought I would love to try to make people feel that way. And that's just kind of just went forward from there. And, it's just a lot of dumb luck and lots of reversals, but ultimately, was able to just tell stories for a living. Very lucky.
Thank you. And I thank you for bearing with me. I had one more question for Elliott, which is just how you mentioned that you have a long history of doing audio editing. How would you compare audio editing and video editing? How do you experience that differently?
Well, because video is such a big part of audio, I just feel like it's been a real advantage. The biggest change, obviously, is that you can actually watch audio editing. I'm old enough to have worked with razor blades and cut tape, and the transition into digital has been transformative. But I listen, and there's a musicality to video. And so that's something that I'm trying to bring from the audio stuff that I'm doing into the video, knowing that they're so connected. So I just try to make the connection whenever I can.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have questions? We're coming up to Barry.
Barry's muted.
You have to unmute, Barry.
There
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Just a note on Judith and Igor's piece. I love the occasional shots to the over the head and looking down at them. That was just delightful, and it was not overused. It was just put in there wonderfully. And also, Judith, thank you. When my partner Joe Robbins passed away, Judith, as a tribute for our Zoom memorial, created a little dance in her honor, and that was shared with about 50 people a little over a year ago. So thank you, Judith.
I want to speak about that over my head thing. It was terrifying as a dancer to have a Zoom pilot in the room with you, not a Zoom, a drone pilot in the room with you, and it's over your head. It wasn't over Igor's head. It was over my head continuously. And I had to raise my arm because, like in Katherine's dance, my arms, my hands were very much part of the choreography. And every time I raised my hand, I was afraid my fingers would be eaten up. And I had to be convinced that the drone works with body heat. And when your arm goes up, it will sense it and it will go higher. But it didn't have very much higher to go. So as wonderful as it was in the effect, and thank you for that, it was quite, it was the only moment of anxiety that I had that entire day, was working with a drone camera that made a lot of noise, that messed my hair up because it kept blowing like a helicopter. And I had to just keep focused on my choreography, my partner, and just stay with it. So thank you for, for saying that it worked. Thank you.
You know, as a member of the audience, I'm not a filmmaker in any way, but and I've always appreciated Rivertown Films and what you all do so much. This was extraordinary. You know, like this, I had heard about this from my dear friend Judith Rose because she was telling me what she was doing. So I've been waiting for this. And then I signed up for this conversation tonight, and this morning realized, oh my goodness, I haven't seen the films yet. So it was really the most extraordinary experience this morning, just sitting and watching each one. And some of the filmmakers in their intro, several of you said, you know, you hope that the audience would enjoy it. And so I was sort of struck by the choice of word enjoy, because some of the films, you know, there's a horrifying aspect, or there's an aspect of death or other things, but I really did enjoy each of them, if that means being intrigued, and some of the time just smiling the entire time. And I just thank you all so very much. I appreciate it. And thank you.
Spread the word about part 2.
Yes, I definitely am. I'm going to spread the word about part 1 also for people who didn't see these. You know, it's really great.
Thank you. Are there any more? Thank you so much, Connie. That was a beautiful comment. Any more questions? I
don't have a question. I just want to say how good it is to see your faces. It's really wonderful. Charlotte went to school with Natalie, Judith, of course, but just all of you. And Elliott was my neighbor. I mean, you know, Connie. So I just want to say how great it is, and to see everybody. And thank you for doing this and allowing me to be a part of it. Very fun.
I would second that. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed my conversation with you all tonight. Sometimes I get a little bit too much in athletics, and it's nice to get back to my art side and have this conversation with you all.
Well, we're very glad you did it. We appreciate everyone who participated. We hope you'll spread the word so more people can see these films and see the recording of this conversation, and stay involved with Rivertown in whatever way works for you. Go to our website, be sure you're on our e-news list so you know what's coming up. Of course, part 2 is coming up this weekend, and the conversation will be on Wednesday, the 29th of September. And
Send money. I did.
Send money. Thank you.
Yes, more money.
Donations of any size are greatly appreciated. We need them, or we can't do this. And there's a link to donate conveniently in the chat, or of course on our website. We appreciate all you do. Anything further to add, Matthew? No. Okay.
Good night,
It's been
y'all.
a great
Thank you.
evening. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
all coming. And
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night. Good night, everybody.
Thank you to the organizers too. So.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Juliana.
great job, Charlotte.
Take care.
Yeah, Charlotte,
Take care.
wherever you go. Where you go.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, all.